What were the most important fantasy football takeaways from the Saturday and Sunday action of Week 15 in the NFL? It's time to break it down right here and right now as we provide reactions to all that we saw on Locked On Fantasy Football.
Are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com. It was a crazy Week 15. That's the only way to describe it right off the bat, with the comeback, the greatest comeback in NFL history by the Vikings, putting up massive fantasy numbers, coming back to defeat the Colts, which is the most important thing for us. Not so much there for that middle game with the Ravens and Browns, and we had things light up again for us with the Dolphins Bills, and it continued into Sunday. A lot of exciting action here. Some disappointments, but mostly positive results here. A lot of running backs coming out of the woodworks to give us big days. The top quarterbacks coming through. A lot of good wide receivers doing what they're supposed to do on the field. So pretty good weekend for fantasy overall as we are into the fantasy football playoffs. A lot of leagues maybe starting them here in Week 16, but we're going to get you covered here. It's a big week ahead. We've got games on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day through the night. So we got you covered here. Don't worry. It's the holidays, but it's not a break for us here in Locked On Fantasy Football. We're going to be with you the whole way through the regular season, looking at the playoffs as well. Fantasy football lives on here, and we will keep bringing it to you here on Locked On Fantasy Football. All right, thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. We're free and available to you on all platforms. We will get into the takeaways in a moment. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, we'll start on the positive note. There were just so many good, exciting performances. So let's talk about those first. Then we'll get to the disappointments. Then we'll close looking at our injury updates here. These are things that didn't go as well. There wasn't too much there, but one notable injury, no, to Jonathan Taylor and the Colts. So really bummed out if you had him because, again, he got hurt early in that game, the high ankle sprain. You saw Deion Jackson and Zach Moss do the most of the damage. So we'll get into that injury. Let's start with that game, right? What a game there for Kirk Cousins, coming back 460 and 4, second consecutive week for more than 400 yards passing. So Kirk Cousins bringing it. One of the negative game script that we did not expect there against the Colts, but you took it, right? I mean, going down 33-0 is awesome because that means you're going to throw a ton in the second half, but it really didn't hurt Dalvin Cook because he got involved in the passing game. Finally, what we want to see. And what did he do? He had the 65-yard touchdown there that helped tie the game. They got the two-point conversion. After that, in regulation, they get the game-winning field goal by Greg Joseph. So Dalvin Cook looked fantastic. His best game, I think, overall of the season because they threw to him. He had 95 yards rushing, 95 yards receiving, 21, 190, and 1 the touches, yardage, and scores here for Dalvin Cook. So what a game for him. He had a touchdown from Adam Thielen in this one. And how about Justin Jefferson? 12 catches on 16 targets, 123 yards, and a touchdown. He was banged up early in that game, really shook it off, came back in, and they threw him like nuts. The other guy that went off of this game, KJ Osborne, he gets 16 targets as well. 10 catches, 157 yards, and a TD. They were missing Kenny Moore, their slot corner. Stephon Gilmore played pretty well in the first half, but then as the game script became negative, Jefferson Osborne just went off the outside. The guy that didn't really do much was TJ Hawkinson, but again, they had to spread the field, the 11 personnel. Jefferson on one side, Osborne on the other, Thielen working in the middle. All three guys scoring as well as Cook to account for the 4 touchdowns for Kirk Cousins. So what a way to start the weekend in fantasy football with that offense going off. So especially Cook, Osborne, Jefferson, but Thielen also came through with Cousins having a big game. Now, the middle game was definitely disappointing, but we did have a standout performance there that we didn't expect again for a second straight week. J.K. Dobbins only 13 rushes in the game for 125 yards. So he just looks good. And we didn't think he was going to be back at all with the knee injury and the complications. Now, this is two straight weeks where with Tyler Huntley at quarterback, the Ravens have leaned on him quite a bit. So that was really the only exciting, notable player there that we had limited performances from the Browns and the other Ravens in that one, and one big disappointment again for Baltimore in that one. But J.K. Dobbins in that middle game on Saturday really came through nicely with the yardage. He could have used a touchdown to really stamp his day, but he's back as at least an RB2 with some upside here. So again, the Vikings offense kind of knew indoors. If they got behind against Colts, you'd see it light up. You knew it was a bit of a grinding game, and that's what we got. As the Ravens couldn't manage a touchdown in the game at all and lost 13-3 in Cleveland with Tyler Huntley just really bringing down the entire passing game. Now, in the nightcap, you had a pretty good game from Tua Tagovailoa. We didn't really love him, but he got the two touchdowns there, one to Jalen Waddle, one to Tyreek Hill, which is what we want to facilitate things. Jalen Waddle goes off. He gets 119 yards in that game. So really good stuff from Waddle and Hill in the snow. The Bills secondary had some issues there. Raheem Mostert, how about him as well? 17 carries, 136 yards. We knew Jeff Wilson Jr. was very shaky to play with that hip injury. So Mostert took advantage of the opportunity. He ran fast, did some work in the passing game as well, used the speed in the open field. So Bills defense pretty vulnerable now with the secondary, and now their linebacker core usually pretty good and continuing to run with Matt Milano. Edmonds covering the backs. Mostert made one move on Milano. That was kind of fun to watch there. So great yardage game for Mostert with touchdowns from the Dolphins. And how about on the other side, Josh Allen? He leads the team in rushing. He goes nuts again. So we really like him to do that. 304 and 4 through the air. Very interesting distribution in that game for Josh Allen. It wasn't the usual suspects scoring. You got Nyheim Hines into the end zone early. Dawson Knox, a second straight big game here, 698 and 1 for Dawson Knox. So Knox scores in two straight games here. He started to get re-involved in the offense, and I think they're getting a little frustrated with Gabe Davis and Isaiah McKenzie. McKenzie struggled with drops. Davis has struggled a little bit separating. He had a few nice catches there, but not a big yardage day. And the teams are keying on Stephon Diggs. They're realizing Davis and McKenzie are limited here, so it's opening things up for players such as Knox, and we saw that. They're using the backfield more. Not only did Hines score, you also had James Cook score on a short reception as well. So bringing it is Josh Allen distributing the ball. His buddy Dawson Knox has become a bigger factor. I just wondered why they weren't using him as much. This was a great matchup to use Knox. We liked him in this matchup. We didn't expect 698 and 1, but definitely really good to see here from the Bills. So again, offense, that's an explosion count for them. But Josh Allen needed that game. He was fading a little bit among the QB1, still in the top three, but 304 and 4 plus the rushing production. What a monster performance when you needed it from Allen there. So let's stick with the quarterbacks here as we looked at the things that went off on Saturday night here that we liked. How about Jalen Hurts? Sunday was a weird day, 315 yards passing, 2 interceptions, but big games that he feels still tilted for A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. No surprise there. The Bears secondary not very good. Kendall Vildor hurting, then Jalen Johnson was lost. So that was it. It was easy matchups on the outside, but the 2 interceptions was weird. Thankfully, Jalen Hurts went off in the rushing attack, 61 yards there and 3 TDs. Miles Sanders, we'll talk about him. Oh, boy. That was a disappointing performance for sure. But looking at what we got from Jalen Hurts, I mean, he had to do this. The negative game script also happened. Justin Fields and the Bears looked pretty good. They had a lead early. You had Fields running all over the place. David Montgomery looked good, scoring touchdowns. So the Bears were manufacturing some offense with their rushing attack with Montgomery and Fields. Not much else on the field. They didn't have Chase Claypool in the game, and you didn't have Quinn Amos St. Brown early after he got hurt. So it was really about the Fields and Montgomery show. Hurts had to answer with a lot of himself on the ground and then throwing easily outside. They didn't activate Dallas Goedert in the game, so maintain the high target volume there for Smith and Brown. So good performance by Jalen Hurts. Not conventional, but that's been the whole season for Hurts. He's going to get it done rushing or passing. It doesn't matter. And some games he's going to get it done both ways. Even with the 2 picks, with the yardage he adds to the rushing. A great performance here by Jalen Hurts, continuing his MVP run. Joe Burrow, 204. So interesting numbers there for the Bengals quarterback that usually get more than 300 yards with 4 TDs. But Joe Burrow really came through in fantasy. Again, negative game script. It could have happened here with Tampa, but that set up things for Joe Burrow to lead the comeback. But we also like his distribution, right? He got touchdowns to the main guys, T against Tyler Boyd and Jamar Chase, of course, all scored TDs here. So that was nice to see for Joe Burrow. Even distribution, no big game from Chase, but Burrow really made sure to distribute and make it well. And the Buccaneers just really with a thin secondary. Jamel Dean was hurting. Sean Murphy-Bunting was hurting. Their safeties were a little bit shaky. Joe Burrow picked apart that group, and we saw the 4 touchdowns. Joe Burrow keeps ringing fans. A big year for him as a QB1. Tom Brady's been disappointing, but he went 3-12-3 in that game. So good situation for Tom Brady there, and he really came through. We also had Chris Godwin and Mike Evans have 83 receiving yards. That's big news when they're back at the level producing. So maybe a get well game, the Buccaneers past game. They get the Cardinals next week. So that's great news here against that weak secondary and limited pass rush. So Tom Brady, 3 touchdowns, had the 2 picks that have helped the Buccaneers blow that lead, and the Bengals come back, maybe a little bit nervous playing against the potential new goat and Joe Burrow, the challenger for Patrick Mahomes here. So looking at 3-12-3 for Brady, good performance in fantasy. We did like him this week based on the fact that they would have a lead, the Bengals, and they would be throwing it, flipped the other way, but it didn't matter. The volume was still pretty high for Brady because it was a negative game script later because the Bengals pulled away from their big deficit and took the lead there. So that was great to see. Now let's go back to running back. We had the Dalvin Cook performance. How about Jerick McKinnon? This was incredible. A second straight week where he exploded. Another 2 touchdowns. He's just being shot out of a cannon. What's happened here? And we're trying to explain this. Isaiah Pacheco has had 2 straight nice rushing games in a row, but McKinnon, you would think, okay, he's a receiving back. How do they involve him if they're playing from ahead? Well, they didn't play from ahead in this one. They had to trail the Texans and the Broncos, so that helped McKinnon's value. That was number 1. Number 2, the matchup was incredible. The Texans cannot stop running backs, either running or pass catching, so that was there. And I think what's happened is they were looking for the big play element. Marquez Valdes-Scantling has been limited in doing that. Travis Kelce and Juju Smith-Schuster are working the intermediate part of the field. What happened was cover 2, McKinnon, dump it off to him, let him do things after the catch here. That's what he did. 18 for 122 and 2 in terms of touches and yardage and scores there. So second straight double here for McKinnon. He's looked good in terms of the speed, getting to that open field. So what you're seeing is, again, they needed someone to replace that Tyreek Hill open field void. Now, I'm not saying McKinnon is the same type of player, but he's got some juice, speed, intermediate, can make things happen after the catch. So that's why you're seeing them unlock him a little bit more here beyond just being a running back there with Pacheco. And we go to Denver, and another great performance for an AFC West back, Latavius Murray. We liked him in this game against the Cardinals after what the Patriots did on the ground. 24 carries, 130 yards, and a touchdown. No competition for touches here. Positive game script. Brett Rippon in there, leaning on the running game. Cardinals defensive line hurting without Zach Allen. So you knew everything lined up for Latavius Murray in that game, and he came through. Sometimes he could really disappoint in the situation, but at home, they gave him the volume. He came through with the production, so and even had a catch. So good job for Latavius Murray. Ramondre Stevenson probably should have lateraled the ball because Jacoby Myers then lateraled like nuts and put the Patriots in the position to lose with the Chandler Jones scoop and score at the end of the game. But you can't fault Stevenson for going. He had the ankle injury, right? We thought, okay, he may not be going. We're worried about him. He was pulled out of the game before. Damian Harris looked like the healthier back with a thigh injury, but guess who was scratched? He was Damian Harris. So you had Ramondre take over 19, 172, and 1 for Ramondre from the rushing perspective. The Raiders defense, again, he got the bulk of the work. He did not disappoint. He was involved in the pass game. So big year for Ramondre Stevenson as an RB1 this year as Harris continues to not be able to get on the field. So it was an up and down roller coaster, right? If you had Ramondre earlier in the week, you're like, oh gosh, I got to get Damian Harris. What if someone else has Damian Harris? They're going to play him. Oh, do I have to get Pierre Strong? Do I have to worry about Kevin Harris? And then it all circled back to Ramondre Stevenson. This is why you got to pay attention to the injury reports late in the week, the progressive to know. And Stevenson ended up being their healthiest back, as we saw a lot. We saw that with the Seahawks situation where we weren't sure about DJ Dallas and Kenneth Walker that ended up being Travis Homer. So things can change very rapidly when you have multiple injuries at running back, and that's what we saw. So pay attention to late things in the week there. And if you'd known Stevenson was good to go by the end of the week, and once Harris was ruled out, I think that was even on Saturday, you knew Stevenson was going to be a fine play for sure. How about Derrick Henry? We knew he was going to smash in the Chargers, but he did a lot through the air as well. And there was a big indication for this. Dontrell Hilliard, we mentioned this on Friday when we were looking at the injury reports. He was ruled out with a neck injury pretty early. He had a scary injury last week there. And so Derrick Henry was going to get the pass catching work, and they dumped it off to him. The Chargers linebackers, defensive line struggles with that aspect as well. So Derrick Henry, we knew was going to mash it, 163 and one from scrimmage with a touchdown. So we like that here. For Henry, not a surprise, not slowing down, by the way, folks. If he's getting involved in the passing game and doing his damage, that's great. Guess who the Titans get this week? It is the Jerick McKinnon damage Texans. Oh my gosh. Derrick Henry could be winning fantasy football championships here. 25, 163, and 1. I would not be shocked if he produced that same number or better against the Texans this week with the involvement of passing game. Check on Dontrell Hilliard. But Henry, again, very capable of pass catching back when they use him. Without Hilliard, they're going to do that. Let's look at Tyler Algier. You did have Corral Patterson run pretty well and score. Caleb Huntley, talk about him, got a little bit banged up in that game. So Tyler Algier, 117 17 rushes, I'd say, 139 yards. So same number as Mostert got filling in for Wilson. Algier pretty much took over the young back role without Huntley. He goes off here 17 for 139. What happened to the Saints' run defense? Very unreliable here, but that's what we saw. Decent games from Drake London, Desmond Ridder. So they stuck in there. Not a lot of scoring there in that game, but Tyler Algier, the rookie, looks like maybe a keeper, a little bit more explosiveness than we think here as they potentially move on from Patterson next year. Travis Etienne did lose a fumble, but 19 carries, 103 yards. But also nice to see 2 catches for 24 in the middle of all that with the receivers going off there for the Jaguars in that game. Etienne looked good. So good that he's back on track. Tough matchup this week against the Jets, but Etienne is getting involved in the pass game and running well again. James Conner, we knew with the Cardinals down 2 quarterbacks, Colt McCoy was concussing him. They're going to lean a lot on James Conner, even without Kyler Murray. They did 19 carries, 91 yards on TD. So he's scoring again at regular rate. He's the lifeblood of their offense. He's healthy. So all that good stuff here for James Conner. How about Brian Robinson Jr.? Not much of Antonio Gibson there. He was mainly having a spark in the return game with 13 carries there, 107 yards, 13 touches, I should say. One of them was a catch, but 107 yards from scrimmage for Brian Robinson against the Giants. So we expected maybe a little bit more because the Giants' the run defense was so bad, but that's what we saw there. And how about Royce Freeman? Royce Freeman, yeah, he resurfaced to the Texans. Not a lot from Rex Burkhead or Dare Ogunbowale. So they had Freeman here with David Pierce going on injured reserve with the ankle. He ends up with 11 carries for 51. So something to watch there. Let's look at Deontay Johnson. 10 for 98 as we pivot to wide receivers. Remember all that talk about Deontay Johnson wanting Mason Rudolph? So go figure Mitchell Trubisky starts. Trubisky has only eyes for Deontay. 10 catches, 98 yards. Again, not spectacular. You want a little bit more production with those 10 catches and a potential for a touchdown, but still solid game for Deontay when we were not getting much. How about Zay Jones in that Jaguars game? We talked about Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence going off big time again in that game. So Etienne, Lawrence, Zay Jones, 6 catches, 109 yards. The Cowboys defense looked terrible. 3 TDs for him. Marvin Jones down the end zone. Evan Engram, not a big day that we were going to duplicate from the Titans game, but he has a nice yardage and catch day to be startable as a tight end. 1, Christian Kirk, lesser numbers, but still came through a little bit with our props. So what a performance by that offense. Lawrence, Etienne, the receivers, the tight end, everything was clicking. Jaguars were trailing big. They were up big. It was just going up and down here with the Jaguars production. But Trevor Lawrence, Doug Peterson, this offense, legit. Offensive line, good weapons. So much like the underrated version of Detroit. Unfortunately, they were disappointing against the Lions just a couple weeks ago, but something to watch there. Good performance there with Zay Jones. Again, not fluky. The Cowboys have really struggled on the outside with Kelvin Joseph having to play. Trevor Diggs is a boomer bust type cover corner, so not fluky. So player number 2 wide receiver. So I really love Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. This week, speaking of Brown, Noah Brown and the Cowboys, 6 for 49 and 2. So on stock, they made T.Y. Hilton inactive. They're talking about Odell Beckham Jr. They just had James Washington back, Michael Gallup involved. Guess who goes off with CeeDee Lamb? It is Noah Brown. So there's some chemistry there, but it's going to be hard again. These number two options behind CeeDee Lamb, hard to project there. CeeDee Lamb has a 100-yard game in that one as well. So then we'll see if Noah Brown is the guy who emerges or a bit fluky here. Juju Smith-Schuster and Travis Kelce looked pretty good in that game, catching with volume, multiple catches in double digits here. 10 for 88 for Juju. So he's the possession guy working right against the cover two. We liked him, and Kelce, they came through against the Texans. How about Jahan Dotson in that night game? 4 for 105. So he was really feeling it with Taylor Heinicke, leading receiver over Terry McLaurin, who's bottled up. The Giants really made a point to not let him beat them, and Curtis Samuel dropped that touchdown near the end of the game, which was probably pass interference by Darnay Holmes, the defensive back for the Giants. Juwan Johnson returned from his ankle injury, 4 for 67 and 2. So good chemistry with Andy Dalton. Good matchup against the Falcons. Came through there with the 2 scores. Unfortunately, came at the expense of Chris Olave, only at 53 yards, and did not hit our prize picks projection. And how about Darren Waller returning? Yeah, Darren Waller returned. He did something. 348 and 1 for Darren Waller. So good for Darren Waller taking over. And no Hunter Renfrow quite back yet. They really shut down Devontae Adams. So shockingly, they went the Patriots matchup to take away the best player. It opened things up for the Raiders and Waller. So Waller 348 and 1 on a good game by Derek Carr with 3 touchdowns, including the game winner to Keelan Cole in that one. But Darren Waller coming through as well in that matchup for the Raiders against the Patriots. So good stuff there all around. So that was a busy look at the positives. We have less negatives to think about here in our second segment on Locked On Fantasy Football. These are the disappointing performances of the day that we'll get to here on the show. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online. And look, we can have some things in our head that we need to get right in our lives. And really, it's all about problem solving. And sometimes we need help with that. It's a situation where there's someone there to get us through this. And BetterHelp is going to get you there. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. They have a special offer for you. You can get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com by using the promo code Locked On. It's BetterHelp.com/Locked On there. So, yeah, we just need a roadmap when we're lost to get where we want, unclog ourselves, get rewired. And BetterHelp is going to have the therapist there that you can find online. You can find the right fit for you. And if not, you can easily switch therapists there and find a better fit here. So, really do recommend BetterHelp. It's an affordable way to get therapy, the online way to do it. It's cheaper than traditional in-person therapy, and it's also more convenient. No waiting in office rooms. You can get your help that you need there in a convenient way. And if it's not working out with your therapist, you can always switch therapists. So again, go to BetterHelp.com and go /Locked On, and you'll get 10% off your first month. That's at BetterHelp, and we thank them for sponsoring Locked On Fantasy Football. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football, as we mentioned at the top, is also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. This days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. It's hard in this modern times here. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's very easy to create a job. You can do it in minutes there. Just add all the details. So easy to do. And again, this is the way you can connect with people faster. And LinkedIn Jobs is going to help you get there. And all you have to do is add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 delivering quality hires with leading competitors. Again, small teams need that support. LinkedIn Jobs is going to be an extra team on your side for your small business. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, we will continue the show here in Locked On Fantasy Football in a moment. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Make sure to check out Locked On Sports today, the biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On Stake of the Day. Locked On Sports today, available on the YouTube, like this show, and wherever you get your podcasts, like Locked On Fantasy Football as well. All right, let's get into the disappointing performances here of week 15. We'll get into the injuries, though. Those are the most disappointing. Justin Herbert, we'll get going with him. 313 yards, so that was our price for projection. That was going to go well past 290. He did that, but 2 interceptions. We didn't get the touchdowns there. Interesting game, low-scoring game. We thought the Chargers would light them up a little bit, but they actually get 2 rushing touchdowns. Go figure, in a really tough rushing matchup. You know, Austin Eckler and Joshua Kelly scored that game. So we didn't have the big game we expected. It was kind of a grindy game. Titans didn't offer much resistance other than Derrick Henry. So it was like a slow battle of attrition. The Chargers offense wasn't on the field quite a bit. So 313, an empty set for Herbert with no touchdowns. It was just a bummer. It was really hard to accept that. And Herbert's had some of these games, right, where he throws for 300 yards and limited or volume. And it's very interesting that the production did not come with touchdowns. So he had a touchdown. If he ran a little bit, it would have been a fine day, but it didn't happen here. So at least the yardage was there. Again, no consolation here. He just didn't perform in relation to Allen Hurts, Burrow, some of those other quarterbacks who were really relied upon this week. So you look at Zonovan Bam Knight. This was not good for him at all. Michael Carter looked pretty good in that game. 13 carries, 23 yards. They couldn't get him going against the Lions' run defense. It's gotten a little bit better, but not that much better. He was getting involved in the passing game, which should not happen at all here with Zach Wilson. So really, the Zach Wilson thing was not good for anybody other than Garrett Wilson playing, because Garrett Wilson is kind of matchup proof at this point and quarterback proof, but Zonovan Knight is not. He's an undrafted rookie running back. They needed a little bit of positivity with the game script. That never happened. Here, there was an even game for much of it. They did get the lead late, but then they gave him a long touchdown to Brock Wright. And their defense was just demolished there late in the game in a bad situation. Robert Saleh couldn't be happy about that, but not happy about it. Zonovan Bam Knight, 13 carries, 23 yards. Very disappointing. There was actually a worse running game. It was the Panthers. What about that one? I mean, you had Najee Harris running all over them on the other side. The Panthers, however, their running backs, Chuba Hubbard and Donta Foreman combined 14 carries, 19 yards. 19 yards. And Hubbard at least salvaged his day a little bit with some work in the pass game, getting to close to 60 yards. But Foreman wasn't getting that. I figured this is what was going to happen, right? The Panthers went off there against the Seahawks last week, save of a run defense. The Steelers are going to notice that. They got TJ Watt back. They're going to say, okay, beat us, Sam Darnold. That's what happened here. And Sam Darnold couldn't beat them. He had one TD pass early to DJ Moore, but really a shutdown performance by that Steelers defense, more of a vintage stopping the run situation here. And the Panthers did have some success throwing on the outside, but not enough there. So they made Sam Darnold beat him, and he could not in that game. Joe Mixon was disappointing. We talked about all the players who went off and scored in that game against the Buccaneers, but only 16 touches for 54 yards for Mixon, splitting still a little bit with Samaje Perine. Not like a split committee type situation, but definitely getting close to the 60-40 type deal, but maybe preserving Mixon a little bit. Also, the game script was negative, so that was not good for Mixon, as well as the matchup still not being great, even though Vita Vea, the big defensive tackle, was not in there for the Bucs. They still played the run pretty decently, and then they were just happy there in this grinding, low-scoring game that they just went to Burrow and trusted him to work him out of it with the passing game, and that's kind of what happened with Joe Mixon taking a back burner. And that one, disappointing wide receivers of the week, definitely Jacoby Myers. I mean, he played against the Raiders. You thought, okay, Jacoby's in business here. He's going to be the leading receiver, which he was, 247. No, Devontae Parker this one, and he lost a fumble on that bad lateral play. So not only did he just have 2 catches for 47, he lost some points for the -2 there with the fumble, with lateral nonsense to Chandler Jones. So Jacoby Myers, I don't know if he's going to be back in the Patriots. Patriots need to reboot this room. Parker and Myers, Nelson Aguilar, Tyquan Thornton. Tyquan Thornton might be the keeper as a rookie, but they need to get a legitimate number 1 receiver. Thankfully, there's players like Keyshawn Booth and Jackson Smith and Jigba they could go after, as well as Quentin Johnson in the draft. They need to get one of these guys. Of course, their track record of drafting first-round wide receivers is not great, so let's hope it's a little bit better next year. See, we thought Chris Moore was going to have a big game. He started out hot against the Chiefs, but then he cooled off 4 for 42. So Unfortunately, the Texans played the lead for a lot of the game. It was even, so they didn't have to force feed the ball downfield. Davis Mills and Jeff Driscoll. So Chris Moore, again, disappointed. He had the hot week there. I thought it was going to be very similar in garbage time. The Chiefs didn't kind of provide the garbage time in this one. So game scripts are something you cannot always predict, and that definitely was the case in that game. George Pickens, 2 for 54. We knew that with Mitchell Trubisky, that was going to hurt his connection there with Kenny Pickett. Go figure. Again, Deontay Johnson calling for Mason Rudolph. He's the one who gets the ball from Trubisky. Pickens did make one nice catch, but they shifted J.C. Horn to him, which was not helpful. And then that was very helpful with C.J. Henderson going down to open things up for one Deontay Johnson on the other side. Devontae Adams, what a disappointment here. 4 for 26. Now, we knew the Patriots were going to take away one thing away from the Raiders. We thought it might be the running game with Josh Jacobs. No, it instead to be Devontae Adams. So they took him out of the game, 4 for 26. That's why the Darren Waller touchdown. That's why other things developed. So this is kind of early in the season. Adams is on a heater, but go figure. The Raiders win a game. Carr plays pretty well, and Adams does not come through here. So product of this matchup for sure with Belichick. A tight end became the most disappointing performances. Another clunker from Mark Andrews, 3 for 31. We want to play him. We know that situation could get better, but did not get better against the Browns. So hopefully it'll get a little bit more favorable this week. Pat Freiermuth blanked. He had the foot injury coming in. He played. He was active, all that good stuff. Didn't see any work here from Mitchell Trubisky. He was not throwing to the tight end much, and we saw that in Chicago as well. Dalton Schultz, 2 for 15. This was without Jake Ferguson, who was concussed. But unfortunately, Peyton Hendershot caught a touchdown pass, the rookie. So Dalton Schultz, very quiet here. I think they're phasing him out slowly. So I think they like the combination of Hendershot and Ferguson. Look to Hendershot in the red zone with Dak Prescott. And Hunter Henry, I thought he was going to do a little bit more with the no Devontae Parker and the matchup. Only 2 catches for 9 yards. So they actually involved Joni Smith more for the Patriots this week. So there you have it. There's a look at the disappointing performances. And really, honestly, folks, to not have that much here is great. I mean, the biggest disappointments came by the injury, and we'll break that down for you in the final segment here on Locked On Fantasy Football. Before we did that, we were excited about our prize picks for the week. We just missed Chris Olave, but we hit a lot of our good ones. Justin Fields and the rushing yards. Miles Sanders was definitely a disappointment there. That was their biggest takeaway, where Jalen Hurts running the negative game script did not help the usage of Sanders in that game at all. So he was a bit disappointing. We did hit on our buddy Justin Herbert with the yardage there with our prize picks projection. Andy Dalton and Olave let us down a little bit in that game with yardage just a little bit shy of what we were looking for there. But overall, pretty good week, especially when you look at Najee Harris and what he was able to do. Derrick Henry with the high total still coming through there. So we like that. And we're going to be excited to play prize picks again in week 16 and the rest of the season here, 3 weeks left into the playoffs. So it's very easy to get on prize picks there. It's daily fantasy made easy. It's you just look at what the player projections are. You just pick a player to go more or less than those projections up at prize picks that are available. You pick 2 to 6 players, and they score more or less than that. You can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. It's no competing against other players. It's just you versus projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That includes NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, college sports, all that good stuff. The World Cup just ended. Congratulations to Argentina over France. We have that action as well. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy, safe, and fast withdrawals you can expect from Prize Picks. And Prize Picks is currently operational in more than 30 states in Canada. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match of $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON and sign up for instant deposit match up to $100 at prizepicks.com. All right, it is time to close the show on Locked On Fantasy Football. I'm going to run through some of the injuries that we had. Colt McCoy at quarterback was not a guy we were starting, but it really dragged down the Cardinals' offense even more. We did like Marquise Brown. DeAndre Hopkins was contained. That's why he had the James Conner thing. Trace McSorley replaced him. So we'll see those Sunday night. If he's not cleared, McCoy, he does get a full week here. Not cleared with that concussion. You're going to have McSorley or maybe someone off the street starting here because Kyler Murray, we know, down for the season with a knee injury. So bummer there for that Cardinals passing attack as they lose quarterbacks. Here, Ryan Tannehill, we'll see what the ankle injury. It looks like he's going to play against the Texans. Keep in mind the first matchup, he missed, and they used Malik Willis, and they had this run crazy offense here. So something to watch. He did come back and finish the game here I thought he was done when he was carted off the field. I said, oh boy, it's going to be Malik Willis show. But then he came back, probably knowing that the Titans needed to win. His job was slipping here, and Willis could have replaced him. So maybe a little bit of motivation for Tannehill to return. Caleb Huntley, an ankle injury. He wasn't needed too much with Algier and Cordell Patterson going off for the Falcons against the Saints. Jonathan Taylor injured on the first second play of the game. Really not good here. When you look at it, Taylor had the one productive play, but then he was out. And then he saw the guys, Deion Jackson and Zach Moss, replace him and do well. So that's what might have been here for Jonathan Taylor. If Taylor, maybe they would have closed out the game against the Vikings with him running in the second half. And high ankle sprain, probably going to end up on injured reserve, much like Damian Pierce suffered that injury last week. So he's probably done here, and don't count on Jonathan Taylor for the rest of the fantasy football playoffs. And now the Deion Jackson situation clouded a little bit more with Zach Moss being involved. Wide receiver, we go back to Thursday. The big one is Tyler Lockett, fractured his finger. So probably going to miss this great matchup against the Chiefs this week in Week 16, the fantasy football playoffs. So really disappointing there. So DK Metcalf, fire him up, should have a bigger role this week, as well as Marquise Goodwin. A matchup against the Chiefs. Now, the Jaguars had a lot of good vibes in their offense, but Cam Robinson got hurt in that game. The injury, very talented pass protector. We'll see how that affects them this week against the Jaguars, their left tackle. So something to look at there. The Bengals, Tom Brady was a little bit more comfortable. There was no Trey Hendrickson in that game. He had a wrist injury and missed it. Now you have Sam Hubbard hurt with a calf injury. So this could help Mac Jones. Well, the Mac Jones didn't look great against the Raiders this week. The Bengals playing the Patriots here coming up. So those are really those notable injuries. Not a lot there to think about. Jack Sanborn was killing an IDP, replacing Roquan Smith for the Bears. He got hurt, unfortunately, against the Eagles. Looked like a great game to rack up tackles there. C.J. Henderson was a big one, so he attacked there. That's going to be good this week, folks, because J.C. Horn on the outside, probably going to see a bit of a DJ Chark, so that could open things up for Jameson Williams this week. So something to look at there. And Titans lost a couple more corners, Josh Thompson, Terrence Mitchell. Wasn't a big game for either Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, but Texans next week, so maybe a good rebound spot for Chris Moore there to do some damage. In garbage time, Jalen Johnson being a key injury for the Bears in the secondary. That's where you saw the two Eagles receivers go off, so some things going forward to look at there. And Cam Taylor-Britt, another injury for the Bengals. He was the guy filling in for Chidobe Awuzie, the rookie from Nebraska. He got hurt there as well. So some injuries there defensively that can have some impact on fantasy football there going forward. So there we have it. There's a breakdown of your key takeaways, your positive performances, your negative performances, what they mean, how they came about, and then what we're looking at with the injuries and how they're going to affect fantasy football going forward in the playoffs. So good way to start the week here, Locked On Fantasy Football. Again, we'll bring it to you all week this week. No days off. I know it's a big weekend with Christmas Eve, Christmas Day games, as well as Thursday night with the Jaguars and Jets. So we're going to have all the analysis you need. We're going to have a regular week. We'll do Pickup Tuesday there and give you the waiver wire analysis you need. Then we'll do a double shot matchups there. Matchup Wednesday, matchup Thursday. Look at the quarterbacks and running backs first, and then wide receivers, tight ends, shooting defenses. Then we'll come back. It's a good time to get in there on DFS, prize picks, FanDuel, DraftKings, all that good stuff here with the season's ending and a chance to add a little bit more to our fantasy football fun here down the stretch. So good stuff everywhere. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your personal day. Now make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today podcast available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer. Good luck if you need something in the Packers-Rams game tonight to win your fantasy football matchup, and we'll catch you tomorrow with waiver wire advice for Week 16 on Pickup Tuesday.